And record. There you go.
Okay. All right, let's do, where to go? This one. Make sure. Are you guys seeing that all right? Yeah, okay. All right.
Yep.
And thank you, thank you. So I'm going to talk about fluid scaling technology, which some of you might know as FaST Agile. I wanted to mention thank you to Steve because he actually paid for lunch that day also, which was really awesome. And then he got me a job, and now look where I am. Anyhow, so there's a lot of different aspects of FaST that I can talk about. I want to talk about three main ones that kind of come up over and over on teams that I've worked on that are they're kind of standouts as really important drivers of high performing teams that build like really quality software. And those are self-organization, dynamic reteaming, and short value cycles. Those three things I think are very important to where we need to go and how we need to build software in quote unquote a better way. I mean, there's other things that contribute. There's collaboration, there's TDD testing, there's psychological safety, process experimentation, all those sort of things. I could go on and on about them, but I want to focus on these today. Also, this is a newer talk, and so please feel free to jump in, ask questions. Let's make it a little bit of a discussion as I go along, because I'm still kind of flushing out exactly where I want to go with this. You can put something in the chat, or you can just sort of raise your hand and jump in. All of that's fine. So before I really get into this, let's talk about the Cynefin framework. This is Dave Snowden came up with this framework. It's 4 domains that describe cause and effect relationships. I don't want to get too deep into them because there's a whole discussion talk on these. But it's really important to understand where we are in this framework when we talk about how we build software. And I really want to focus on the two domains of complicated and complex. And I probably should have switched them, but this is how they show up in the diagram. Complicated, the domain on the right is causal, meaning that cause and effect is known, it's deterministic, it's reducible work. We can split it up and make it smaller and divide it into chunks. It's completely defined with finite dimensions, and it's predictable. And this is things that can be hard but are known. Car engines, tax code. Oh my God, it's terribly hard, but it's known. Building a jet, a 747, right? Really hard, really complicated. You have to have good knowledge and a great background. But if you do it 3 times and you write it down, we can split it up into small chunks. We can do it over and over. We can make the same jet. Complex, on the other hand, is the non-causal, non-deterministic. It's the outcome might not be reproducible. It's emergent and responsive. It's got a pattern that's predictable, but the exact outcome isn't. Right, and we often use the human body or weather, and in this case, software is also in this complex domain. And there are certain practices that we do that might not in the software industry, like in development, that could be in the complicated domain, right? Updating libraries, setting up infrastructure, refactoring code, all those things. We understand they have a known outcome, a known cause and effect. But when we talk about things like ideation, and discovery and value creation, those are definitely in the complex domain. And this is really important because when we talk about the complex domain, work in that complex domain is accomplished by creating simple rule sets to guide our processes. A really good example of that is a roundabout, right? Do we know the rules for a roundabout? They're very simple. It's very complex in that you get a lot of cars that move faster through there, but it's a simple rule set, and those rules are really easy. Look left, and if no one is coming, go. Right? That's the rule set. You look left, no one's coming. All right, I'm going to go. And everybody else does the same thing. We follow this simple rule set, and we can get a lot of cars moving through there. This also works, this simple rule set also works when we get into a much larger aspect of this same complex system. This is Swindon in the UK. This is a fabulous roundabout. It's still got that simple rule set. It's the UK, so that's changed the rules. It's look right, and then if nobody's coming, then go. But the thing is, we don't need to apply all these rules and all these processes around this to allow this complicated or this complex endeavor to happen. Right? So I think this is really important, because when we start talking about how we build software, we need to take this into account. So let's look at the first of the three. The first one is self-organization. How many people have been to a open space conference? Yes, thank you. I see a couple hands. Open space is really, it's a complex endeavor around self-organization. There's no agenda for the conference when you get there. There's no agenda for the day. And by the way, we have a fabulous 3-day open space conference that's coming up this year in March in Portland. It's called Open Agile Northwest, and Agile Open Northwest, and it is one of the most amazing conferences that I've been to. But you get there in the morning, and there's no agenda set. And we set the agenda by using some simple rules, and we have a conference by using simple rules. There's actually only 4 rules, and we all sort of agree to them. Those rules are: whoever comes are the right people. Whatever happens is the only thing that could happen based on the people who show up, right? When it starts, it's the right time, and when it's over, that's the right time to end. There is one law that affects this, and I'm going to bring it up because we'll talk about it later also. And that's the law of personal mobility, that says if you find yourself in a situation where you are neither learning nor contributing to the learning of others, you move to somewhere where you can learn or contribute to the learning of others. And so this is, we'll talk a little more in depth about that later. But what we do at the Open Space Conference is we have a wall, and the wall has an open grid on it. And one by one, people come up and say, I'd like to host or have a session on whatever. Product discovery tips and questions is one of them. Agile in food companies is another. And you put that on the wall and say, I'm going to be in the ballroom Yellow Balloons at 2:15, and you put it in there. And everyone else does this, and you come up with an agenda for the day, right? We can do this in what, 30 minutes? I think we can form a whole conference. Think about how long it takes to create and create an agenda for a conference that is not open space, like a tracked conference. Weeks, months, you know, it takes a long time. And yet we can do this in about a half an hour. So if we can do this for a conference, can we do this around work? How we work? We actually tried this at Premier Blue Cross. Steve and I and several others of us, we actually took several teams and we put them all together, and we trusted the team to do the right thing. And we allowed the team to choose the work that was going to be done. We used a modified open space marketplace to self-select our work. We had several project managers, PMs, I think we called them product directors, who we would ask to put maybe the next 10 most important things on the board. So it wasn't that we were just choosing whatever we wanted, but with their guidance, out of these 10 things we were, I will, or in just a second, out of these 10 things, we would select maybe 5 to work on for the next value cycle. And when I say important things, I'm talking about priority work in terms of the product directors. Their job was to get together and say, okay, we have the ability to suggest the 10 highest priority things we'd like to see them work on. And what should we put up there? And it was up to we had 3 product directors. It was up to them to choose whether everybody got 3 or somebody got 8 and each other person got 1 or whatever. It wasn't up to the team to try and do all the work that the product directors wanted, but it was more up to the product directors to give, to kind of decide amongst themselves what was the priority for the company. Out of I think there were 3 products at our highest point. Does that answer your question, Oren?
Kind of. So can you think that you can do like, hey, in the level of objective, like business objective, go chase this OKR, or it's more of like go build this product? Is it like a problem space or solution space?
In this case, it was probably more of the solution space, although I think as you start to mature in this practice, it can be more in the problem space. And part of it is this is not just about a bunch of developers doing work. This is about the entire team, right? So the product directors, the business analysts, the testers, the ops, all of those people need to work together and to do the work that's necessary at the time it's necessary, right? This is what's important. And so as you're learning and as we were starting to do this, at first it was us having to kind of train the product people, right? First they wanted to just give us like, here's a story, here's a story, here's a story. Later on it became, here's a thing that I think is necessary. Can we, it moves slightly more from that solution space into the product space. Yeah, Steve.
So, Oren, it was both. There were 2 guiding principles to the overall product, or to the overall vision that this group of individuals had to tackle. Some was getting the company to the cloud. Another was supporting mobile and developing mobile, a whole new mobile app at the same time. So there was tackling complex problems and complicated problems and figuring out how are we going to do these things. So we definitely, when we started the transition, it was more, here are the stories. As we matured, it was more, here is the problem. Make sense?
Yeah, because when you give folks the problem space, you elevate, you increase their autonomy, right? beyond just like the solution, and also like become wear the product hat as well, or go to product, go to the customer even directly, right?
Yeah.
Even increasing the autonomy.
Yeah, and actually, I'll move on. This is an example of the marketplace we used, very much like the open space board. You'll notice that this isn't the best example, but it's a fine one. The work that we worked on was put into the 5 slots that we have there. In this case, I'm not sure when it was, why the 5th slot wasn't filled, but we had asked the product directors to put a lot of stuff on the board, stuff they wanted us to work on. In this case, diagnostics and metrics collection is the first one. That's not really a story. That's kind of more in that less solutions, more product side. But the second one is iOS user receives pop-up on device, and that's more story-like, right? That's so. So I think it becomes a level of maturity for the company, right? Also, Harry, you had put in the chat talking about the dependencies, working with dependencies, and the architecture and that sort of thing. This, as you start to mature in this practice, and I'll talk about it a little more later, but the dependencies are that's what we were really trying to deal with when we moved into this. It's less about having dependent teams and more about, how do I say, putting those teams together to allow those dependencies to kind of cross-pollinate and be worked on as they come up. Yeah, so this is boy, this is very old, and I don't have a great answer about what exactly we're looking at here. But this was more the way we laid out our board when I was talking about our open space marketplace. We have across the top our market areas and the way that we self-organized our work. Some of them are more feature size, and some of them are much more story size. And I don't think one of the biggest issues, or one of the biggest things that we ran into, is it didn't have to be all one size. Sometimes it was like, I just want to refactor this. Sometimes it was, I need to build diagnostics and collection matrix, or matrix collection. So yeah, yeah, that's good, Steve. Where do we want our 4 fire hoses pointed in this case? So let me move on a little bit, and we'll talk about this, and maybe it'll kind of answer some of the questions and probably bring up some more. One of the really important things that I found on high-performing teams I worked on is this ability to dynamically reteam. Dynamically reteaming means that instead of having separate teams for each area of the work or the business, and you have a long list of stories, and then you try and, like, who's going to get the certification expiration story? Is that the API team or the security team? What about the federated login? Is that the UI team that works on that to connect the back end, or is that the security team? Or, you don't have to pass these out to different teams. Instead, you put everybody together into a single collective. You take all that knowledge and you put it together. And this is kind of where we're getting out of, like, dependent teams work together, and we form and instead we bring those teams together into a single large collective, and then we form around the work. Going back to the law of personal mobility, this we really use this quite a bit in this idea of, if you if we talk about this in terms of work, you go to where you're needed, right? You go to a place where you are contributing to the value of the work. And if you are not in a place where you're contributing to the value of work, you go to a place where you can either contribute or learn, right? You are allowed to go to a place where you can learn if you're not needed some place to contribute. And this was part of our way of passing the knowledge around to the different people as well. So we didn't getting rid of those dependencies, or at least sort of trying to ease those dependencies, especially in terms of siloing knowledge. So in our case, we would ask the product owners to put stuff on the board in terms of, here are the top things that we would like to see worked on, and the collective would then form around the work, create teams around the work to do the work usually until it was finished, or at least until there was a point where there was something more important. So for instance, I was just trying to come up with stories here of creating some sort of login page and login functionality, right? So maybe the team has all of these on the board. They find that, oh, these are the 3 that we think we can create value with first. So someone would step up and say, I'm going to work on the login page. I need someone that knows, how to do the testing for the UI side, and I'm going to be in this room. Someone else would work on the logging API, and maybe that could be, it didn't necessarily have to be someone from the API team. It could be someone from the UI team as well, or the security team as well, because they can offer their knowledge. When we put this data out, the UI side is going to want to use it this way, so let's format it so that the UI can easily handle it. Or we need to think about this security for the endpoint. How can we wrap this, or how can we set this up, right? We're using everybody's knowledge at the point that we need that knowledge, as opposed to trying to split up the work and push it to the different teams. And so once we would do this in the iterations, once that our value cycles, as that value cycle started finished, then the collective would then move on to the next most important work that the app didn't do. Questions about this? I know there's a lot, and this is one of those areas where I think there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm not sure that I fully, or I think I could maybe pose it a little better, but I'd love to hear if anybody has questions or comments.
I had kind of like a question, just kind of trying to clarify it in a certain way for how my brain thinks. But what I feel like you're saying is there isn't a specific team or set of teams per iteration, per product or feature you're working on. Every week it may change what team exists and who is on what team based on what the product or the workload or whatever is actually requiring of you to do.
Yes. So if you want to think of it as a team, we're all a team. We're not separating out into silos based on knowledge, but instead we're all together as one large group. And then we form into smaller groups around the work as we are able to, in terms of our knowledge and what we can add to the value. So yes, and one of the things that we found, we did very short iterations, and I'll talk about that next, but we did very short iterations. That didn't mean that work had to be finished. It didn't mean that the team would totally break up and come back, and change every value cycle. In fact, often they would become sort of sticky groups, sticky teams of people, because once you start working on something, you kind of have this almost drive to see it to fruition. And so you know, I might work on the login API, and unless there's something else that comes up later, if we're not done with that login API, I'm going to stick with them and keep going. Right. Toby, you had a question
Hi.
about that?
Yeah, why are you using this this word collective? That a lot of people associate that with you know, a bunch of commie lefties.
Yeah, naming's hard, so that's the main one, right? And one of the hardest are the aspects when I use the collective, because it's just a collection of our knowledge workers. It's a collection of the people, our developers and analysts and testers and anybody who needs to be there. You know, the problem with using the word team is then what do we call the smaller groups that break out to form around the work? A group, a team, you know, so naming's hard. In this case, we've gone with collective because it really is a collection of knowledge workers.
Okay.
A super team.
I'd love if you have a different or a solution for that.
Well, I don't,
Yeah.
but I was just looking at the definition of collective here on Wikipedia. I've been part of many collectives, but that's because I've got very lefty politics, and I've been involved with musical collectives, political collectives, and that word was like, huh. So I was wondering how you ended up with that and what you really meant by that. So a collection of people, like typically it means a lot more than that to many people, but
So
yeah.
There's probably an aspect of this, because, you know, part of the idea of being in this collective is that it's not a top-down command and control structure. It's very much an emergent leadership, emergent like practice. The people that are in the group have the ability to work on and choose the work that they do and make the decisions. Again, this is as we become more and more mature working this way. So in that case, it very well could be closer to that collective that you're thinking of as well, right? Because it's not like there's a person, a manager, a scrum master, a PM or whatever, that's giving us the work and saying, you three are going to work on this and you four are going to work on this. And that's not happening, right? We are self-selecting and forming around the work that needs to get done. So yeah, probably there's a lot of that in there too. Yeah, Michael, you got your hand up? You're muted there, so. Zoom muted. No. You want to type it in the... Yeah, I heard you there.
Okay. I want to tie a couple things together, because this term collective, maybe just Uber group or something, but what I remember you at Primera was kind of a collection of 40 people, which is bigger than a 2-pizza. It's bigger than a scrum team. It's bigger than a squad. But one of the things that I think about is Dunbar's number. And, you know, the number is 200. But if you divide it and multiply it out, it's like, how many people do you eat with? How many people do you go to church with? How many people do you go on a hunting party with? How many people do you build a stadium with? Like, there's certain things that happen at certain different sizes. And so just to clarify some things, like, so when I saw you guys doing this, the people who took a particular thing and worked on it was like 4 to 6, but it was 40 people in the quote collective. And then I wanted to tie that back to something I saw Harry say of this can't work for whatever. I'm going to flip that around and say it can work exactly because of this. Because when you've got 40 people and it's time to move from one environment to the other, you've got the right people to swarm on that thing. And they weren't working together last week, but now that it's at that phase where it needs to go from one to the other, and I maybe I'm reading too much into what Harry wrote, but it's not. I took it to say you can't do this because you need to integrate certain people, and I'm saying that's exactly the point, is that people self-organize around the work that needs to be done and the skills they have and the interest they have in kind of groups of 4 to 6, but that's because you've got a collective or Uber group or tribe that goes out on a hunting party of 6.
And I think definitely you're correct there, is that the main aspect of this is getting rid of those dependencies and the silos that we create when we create separate teams for features or functionality, right? And part of the really positive aspect of this is that we start to work with other people and learn from those other people in areas that probably we wouldn't have gotten had we been on those siloed teams, right? And
yeah, and so I kind of wanted to invite Harry to speak to that point instead of me speaking for him if I missed part of an intention there.
sure, most certainly.
I don't know. I didn't want to misstate what his intention was. Okay.
I don't know where we are. I don't know what comment you're pointing at.
That's
Something
fine.
about-
We can come back or continue to discuss it as we go. Just a note, I see that people are asking for slides, the slide link. I'm going to actually make this available at the end. It'll be on my website as well. I try and make sure that those are available. I don't have it up yet, so we'll get there. But oh, there was one other thought I wanted to talk about, but maybe we'll come back to that. Let's move on and let's talk a little about the short value cycles. In every really high performing quality practice great team that I've been on, the shorter the value cycle, the better it has been. Right, this fast feedback loop is there so we can share information, evaluate, update, and repeat the process, right? And the goal is to get both positive and negative feedback that we can immediately, that can be immediately fed back into the process. The goal is not to finish. The goal is not to be done with whatever work we've started, but to be able to show value added and continuously improve from that feedback. In FaST, we recommend 2-day value cycles. We've tried longer, we've tried shorter. Neither of them worked as well. And in fact, so we tried 1 day, that was not effective. But we had been doing 2 days for a while, and we were asked to try to experiment and try a week long or 2 weeks, maybe it was. And so because we experiment a lot with this, and I'm talking about when we first started doing this, we experimented quite a bit. We decided, okay, for the next 2 months, we'll do 2-week value cycles. And it was apparent fairly quickly, and probably within the week, that it felt much slower. It felt like nothing was getting done. It felt like we were being less effective. And so I don't think we even got to the end of that experiment before we reverted and said, no, we're gonna do 2 days. Yep. 2 days is it's a way. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so the 2-day cycles are great. We've also played around with, and most recently I played around with dynamic cycles of a day or less, and had some really good success with that. But that is very much on a high-performing crafter team. So that would be like trying to getting a bunch of Olympic cyclists or Tour de France cyclists together to do a bike race. You're already starting at a high level. Peter, you had a question?
I'm just craving for some examples of the outcome of the value cycle, the value demonstrated, the learning accomplished, as opposed to finishing.
Yes, and that's a hard one to really pick up in the you know, when you haven't been trying this. I'm just realizing this is a horrible slide, by the way, but we'll fix that. The value, what is value, right? That's really important. That's a really important concept to understand, because value is not, it's not measured in velocity. It's not measured in story points. It's not measured in being done, right? Are we adding value if we come back 2 days later and we've got something done and committed and pushed out to production? Probably. Are we adding value if we worked on something hard for 2 days and we realize this is not going to work? We're going to have to find a different way because this library is, you know, incompatible with what we're doing or whatnot. Is that adding value? Yes, I would say yes. So, you know, are we adding value if you know, if we refactored for 2 days and we didn't necessarily finish a story, but we spent the time creating quality code so that we could continue to build upon it? I think so. So I think this idea of value is really important to this, and that's something that I think that the team needs to come to an understanding of, and really the product people have to know this as well. Getting that feedback in very short time frames, it allowed us to make those, well, that's really the whole Agile aspect of being able to apply that feedback. Are we going down the right way? Are we, you know, I always use the you know, sort of step away and use the example of, you know, when you're working on 2 weeks cycles and you need to, you're expected to have something done, you know, the story point or the story is supposed to be done at the end of at the iteration. What happens when you hit that second Wednesday and the code isn't necessarily working, right? If you're in a company that expects you to have it done because you committed to it for that iteration, you start shoving code in there to try and make it work. You start cutting corners to try and make it work, right? And with this, the value aspect of it is, and not having to have it finished, means that I don't have to do this. I have to show that I've added value, that I have to show that I'm continuing down the path of working to get this done, but I don't necessarily have to have it done. That's kind of a circular statement, but does that answer your question, Peter, or is that?
Yeah, it kind of dovetails then into another question, which you don't have to answer, but is there a meta iteration used in product management or something? So I mean, I understand the purpose of the value cycle now.
Yeah.
And so now it seems that the organization is going to mandate some form of project tracking. Well, not even tracking, you know, estimations. It seems like one could feed the beast for a time by saying we're adding value, we're not done, but we're adding value. Sure. And then at some point they stop believing it because it's not done.
So but I don't think that's I don't think that things progress in that not done state sort of indefinitely. In fact, I think that this focusing on a shorter value cycle and iterating more often on that work, and things start to get done quicker, more rapidly. And I think that's more of a because we start to get more knowledge, because we start to make better decisions based on the knowledge that we have from the last short cycle. In terms of estimating and that sort of thing, it's not something that we did as a team. In fact, that's a whole nother talk to get rid of estimating and find better ways. And Steve has a great blog post and some great knowledge about Monte Carlo estimations and simulations, because I think, the times that we were asked to sort of track the amount of time it took us, we actually ended up tracking the actual amount by saying, here's when we started, here's when we ended, right? And then we could look at that in some sort of, reporting structure. But yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Absolutely. Someone definitely comes up and asks, when are you going to be done? When's something going to be delivered? That's a whole nother series of talks. There's Monte Carlo, there's the wisdom of crowds, there's other experiments that we've run on this, but it doesn't fit into the time frame. Now, one of the things that we talk about with those 2-day cycles is there was an eye for wrapping up whatever it was in a state that it could be handed off to another group. Because at the end of those 2-day cycles, we were never guaranteed that work was going to get picked up again. So to folks' point where they're talking about, well, when's it ever going to get done? The group that was working on it in that 2-day cycle was focused on delivering and wrapping that bit up so that it was as done as it could possibly be. There were some that got bigger and lasted longer. However, at the end of those 2-day cycles, all of them were wrapped up most of the time. I'd say 80% of the time they were wrapped up at the end of 2 days.
So, yeah, along with that, I think if we tend to, like, the teams that I've worked on, really high performing teams that I've worked on that do this sort of practice, talk about last responsible moment, not last possible moment, but last responsible moment. We'll do as opposed to planning out, this is going to be the entire thing and we want this whole thing done. Here's a little bit, here's the value we added for the value cycle that we just completed. Is this, we shipped it or we committed the work and push it out? Do we, knowing what we know and what we've gained from that value cycle, do we continue to work on this, or is there something more important? So this was a practice that required the product directors to be part of as well, right? So it really started to be a communication, not just devs here and product here, but they had to be part of that communication. It was more evolved than just coming up with sort of stories. It had to be this process of, let's figure out where we're at this moment and where the next steps are. And is this the last responsible moment to continue to write this code to add these other things that we expected to be in there? Or is there a more important thing that the app doesn't do that we should work on right now? So, and this is all things that we, again, not necessarily part of the short value cycles, but I think that the short value cycles allowed us to get to being able to get that feedback and that communication in very short iterations allowed us to start having these conversations, different conversations, just as the forming around the work and dynamically reteaming starts to allow you to have different conversations, changes how how the work is structured and changes how the work is given to the collective, right? So it's sort of like the change that we make forces changes elsewhere that then change, you know, the process again, and you're continually sort of evolving. And I just want to kind of step forward here, and the three things that I wanted to bring up: self-organization, dynamic teaming, and short value cycles. Those three things are really important to having high-performing teams that do good quality work, especially in the FaST framework. And I don't know if I left this in here. Oh, I did. I just wanted to touch on FaST a little bit more. This is actually the process that we had, and I probably, maybe I should have put this at the front, but it doesn't. This is a whole different talk. Our FaST, our organization, when we do FaST, and when we use fluid scaling technology, we have a one-time setup where we bring everybody together to work as a collective, and we put all the work on the wall. And I didn't talk about this, but that radical communication of making sure everything is seen by everybody whenever they want. Here's the work we're doing, you know, here's the work that we expect, here's our team charter, here's our working agreements, all that sort of thing. Visible communication. It's really about communication. And then we would self-organize and self-select into teams, do the work on a very short cadence. We'd meet back together to synchronize, and while we were synchronizing, we would then kick off the next cycle. Yeah. So yes.
So hold on one second. So it seems like
okay.
we're towards the wrap up. We will go into the QA section here in a moment. I want to be respectful of everyone's time really quick. Thanks everyone for showing up. Again, we will have QA right now as soon as I get done speaking. I wanted to point out next month's talk will be the fourth Thursday of January. Llewellyn Falco will be coming and talking to us about systems thinking, shared versus split pane. He's a very good friend of the channel, the group. Should be a great talk. And yeah, so let's keep going with Q&A. Sorry for the interruption.
It's okay. I also forgot to put my website on here, which is really dumb. Well, I just updated this, but so you can find, I put all my talk resources on my website at softwareascraft.com. And I'll put that in the chat. And
were you going to stop recording before continuing Q&A, or keep it rolling?
We'll probably keep rolling.
I'll keep it rolling.
I thought I talked about dynamic reteaming, which was forming around the work, and how we used our marketplace to choose where we wanted to go and who and the work we wanted to work on. Did I not?
Yeah, and also the application of the law of personal mobility.
Yes.
Okay, I missed it. Thank you. What was the law of what? Personal mobility? Okay.
Yes. And that was that from the open space that said, you know, if you're not contributing or learning, you go to some place where you can contribute or learn. Michael, you have your hand up there, bud?
Yeah, I don't know how to do it with the app, so I'll just do it old-fashioned way.
Okay.
I hate to put you in a corner of compare and contrast this to Scrum, but I find myself asking the question because I don't even know some of these answers. But like, how is your charter different from how it might have been on a Scrum team? What are your working agreements different from how it might have been on a Scrum 2-week kind of thing? And how is this different from 2 weeks scaled down to 2 days? Yep.
Okay.
So,
let's see.
So there's a lot of difference between that. Scrum generally does not have dynamic reteaming. It's not it. Yeah, you're comparing an apple to a cat.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't.
I hate apples and oranges, so I do apples and tractors. So thanks.
So I don't know what, you know, I would hope that our team charter and team work agreements and such are not that different from Scrum teams. I think that team charters and team working agreements are important, really important, and your team should have them and be going over them, and they should be visible everywhere. You know, it doesn't matter how you're doing the work. You know, I think it's really important in terms of talking about how we work together and how we create ourselves as a team. So I don't think there's much difference there.
I was thinking, you said you get there's a startup at the very beginning of this. Like,
Yeah.
how is coming out of that different? I mean, because if you did exactly the same things, you get Scrum. So coming out of that, something different happened.
Well, and let me channel Quentin Cortell here for a second. You know, about the team charter, the, you know, working agreement, definition of done, definition of ready. All of that is necessary if the team doesn't have a common set of core values. And it all depends on how the core values of the team are understood and followed. Because on teams that are high performing, the core values that everyone does are just done and work. If someone gets on board and doesn't do them, then you have to come up with your core values, and you have to start going through some of those rituals and do it explicitly. So it's different. You know, to me, what you're talking about is how do we make people work the way that the team works? Well, with dynamic reteaming and a truly high-performing team group, I'm saying team, but this is a group of individuals. They have core values that everyone finds as valuable, and they agree to work that way.
I'm smiling because I couldn't sleep last night. At 3 o'clock, I listened to another thing about roundabouts versus traffic lights, but it's reminding me that roundabouts are, hey, let's work it out together because we all have the same way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know what the hell's up. I'll let dad tell me, or, you know, big boss or whatever, you know, the red, green traffic light. And like a jazz ensemble, you know, to pick up on ensemble programming or mob programming, they have sort of a core set of values, so they can fluidly renegotiate. Okay, it's time for the sax to sing a solo.
Yep.
Or not, in a way that 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just finding that a lot of things are like traffic lights. They're making me stop when I want to dance. In a way that this feels like it just allows you to dance. You know, 2 in the morning, don't stop for a red light. Like, there's a roundabout. There's nobody coming. I'm responsible. I decide, I go.
Yeah,
This feels more like a roundabout.
Kind of trying to wrap this back to your second question, and I think part of how we got here originally, when we originally sort of came up with this idea of fluid scaling technology, it existed before. This is something that Quentin had been thinking about for a long time, but it wasn't something that we said, here are the rules, here's the process, let's do it. I think it was much more of a, let's try this, let's experiment. In several places where I've also used FaST, a couple of them have been like really good core group of high quality developers, and said, what do we want to do? How do we want to work? Let's experiment. You know, do we want to work solo? Do we want to work collaboratively? Do we want to have someone just sort of tell us the work and give us the stories, or do we want to, you know, work with the product and select what we think as developers, because we know how to write software, should be the next steps and you know, the next direction? Do we want to, you know, stick with our small groups, or do we want to move to where we can most effectively use our knowledge or learn, right? Like, and I'm of course contriving those examples, but really through experimentation, we continue to come to this place where I think really good practices for how we build software, how we do development, come out. It doesn't matter, you know, if we say like we're going to do FaST, or we say what are some really great practices that will remove some of the gates that we see in the way we develop software, right? And so that's kind of how we got here on most. Now I know there are companies, and James Shore working at one, that he is actually doing FaST, sort of applying the framework, and I'd love to try and get feedback from him on exactly how it's working, what the issues he's seen, and you know, the outcomes and that sort of thing, and maybe we'll get that and try and compile that into something. But Toby, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, hi, I'm just yeah, when I first learned about mob programming, it was at a Agile Open Northwest conference I just looked it up, 2008. Woody Zewell ran a workshop there, and then when I got back to Seattle, I started a meetup group where we tried out this mob programming thing. So I was wondering, Paige and others perhaps, if people were going to, you know, if I or someone else wanted to gather people regularly, which we met up every month or so, like for 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours. We had about like 12 people doing mob programming.
Yep.
Yeah, if we wanted to get people together regularly to explore FaST, ideally doing something practical, can you, what would that look like, do you think?
So are you asking how would you practice FaST, as in deliberate practice FaST?
Yeah, if I mean, with mob programming, it was like, I mean, it was a self-selecting group, right? And some of the people had attended Agile Open Northwest. People wanted to know what mob programming was and try it out and see what it felt like. We didn't build anything in particular. We were just trying different things out each couple of weeks. Does that answer the question? Trying to make it real for us.
Yeah. So how would you practice? How would you do a practice of FaST would be the question, right?
Yeah,
Because,
kind of like to a simulation or yeah.
Yep. And so in the FaST training that Ron, Paige, and I do, we have different examples of that and exercises of that are non-coding wise. The Mayor Schnuffeldorf. So there are exercises you can do, but here's the thing, is FaST really relies on the things that we already know as adults, how to self-organize and get something done. If you look at, actually, I think one of the videos that Quentin uses is a barn raising. And I'm not sure if it's Amish or not, but the barn raising has some planning, but it is not organized in that everyone's not given a task. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. It is, people are there, you have a workforce, they self-organize and get it done. That's the core to FaST.
Sounds like a lot of the kind of anarchist meetings I used to go to 20 years ago in the UK. We had a bunch of 200 people in the field, and we got stuff done, and we organized our own meetings, and So yeah, another group of people who are trying to bring anarchist practices into corporate America. Half
Well,
seriously.
Maybe.
Anarchists, if you're going to say, you know, the commune has a bad connotation, anarchist certainly has a bad connotation right now as well too.
Well, it doesn't. I mean it. I mean anarchism in the real political sense, as in like these are the most organized, responsible, trustworthy people I've ever worked with, and self-organizing. I mean, I moved to this country to live in a collective in rural Missouri, so I mean anarchism with a capital A, I guess, not the sort of chaos. A non-American definition.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful to observe a couple of the software engineering team process problems that we feel like FaST is addressing? Like what comes to mind, for instance, for me is prescriptive structure, disempowering people and slowing things down because they're waiting to be told.
Yes, and it tackles the handoffs, you know, like you say, certain people waiting to be told. It handles people having more initiative. The example that it falls back on that Paige talked about early on with an open space conference is exactly the underlying. I hate it. I'm not a fan of it being called open space technology. The technology word always sticks in my mouth, but that's what it's called. The open space technology, the open space framework that's there allows a group, if we take Agile Open Northwest, which everyone please go, it's awesome. It's an amazing conference. You take 250, 350 people, you put them in a room, there's a grid on the wall. Half the people have never been there before and never experienced it. And in 45 minutes, the whole day's worth of amazing talks are scheduled and we're off meeting. We're off to attend them. I mean, it's reliant on self-motivation, which tends to be beat out of us in the corporate world. Did Paige just drop off?
I don't think so.
Oh no, there you are. Okay.
Okay.
And it fosters the human spirit, as Ron or Quentin would say.
It seems like a great example because in some ways, the two processes, the prescriptive conference and the open conference, both yield a conference. And in other ways, they yield dramatically different results, and that may have different value. So people seeking novelty and engagement may trend towards the open conference, and people seeking to develop survey skills in an area and looking for predictability of topics might not be well served, depending.
So that is a great question. And one of the things with Agile Open Northwest that prior to COVID, for like the 3 years right before COVID, there were a group of crafters that would get together and with the express intent of bringing development back to that conference. And we would meet at first 3 of us, then 5 of us, then 15 of us would meet and plan out how we were going to schedule different topics to address different things for the first day and schedule some evening coding sessions. And we only did it for the first day because the subsequent days, other folks would start showing up and asking great questions and posing good sessions. Now, those sessions are sometimes someone talking about, hey, I know about this new technique, blah, blah, blah. What the Amazon SLO method that someone brought up. Or it's, I don't know how do I introduce ensemble programming to my company? And it's those things. If you go to, I talk about it. If you go to a smorgasbord, no, that's not good. If you go to a Mongolian grill where you go in and you pick all the ingredients that you're going to cook, have them cook, and you complain that, well, the ingredients in my Mongolian stir fry suck. Well, it's your fault that you didn't pick the right ingredients. It's up to you to self-organize and do it.
Which in turn demands a certain competency.
It does. It does. And that's where at Primera with Paige, Quentin, and I, one of the things that we talked about was we want this team to be full of adults.
Maybe back to the single threaded leader. That's like an Amazon idea that sometimes you want to have one person, right? If you have two organizations or even three that are kind of like executing in a silo, you can have one person with the right skill set, of course, let's say that can have both engineering underneath them and product. And this person is responsible for multiple organizations, and their ass is on the line to achieve whatever objectives those organizations have.
Right. So our product manager, our product representative, we had like 5 or 6 different product representatives that championed and were representatives of the organization at the product level. We also had, and those folks would talk amongst themselves to prioritize, here's the backlog of things that we need to get done, that we need. And these aren't stories, these are epics. These are, we need to, I can't remember what they are, but they are epics, they're not stories. Then from there, the story would be picked to say, okay, we're going to work on these 4 or 5 stories, and the teams would dynamically form on them. And for that next 2-day iteration cycle, they would get worked on. And at the end, there would be some sort of demonstrable value, hopefully, most of the time. And it would be, is that enough? Is that good enough? And a lot of times we were actually getting feedback with those product folks multiple times during that 2-day cycle, because they were working with us and we were iterating on it and evolving it. Then at the end of that 2 days, is it good enough, or do we need to keep going, and does it still need to stay up? And sometimes they would stay up, sometimes they wouldn't. If they did transition, or if they were a bigger thing, I can remember one of them was quite literally get to the cloud and have security approve it. That one went on for 2.5 months.
And the team size that worked on it was changing every 2 days?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. It had anywhere from 2 to 8 people working on it at different times. And in that 2.5 months, I'm going to use the word prototype here, but it was not a prototype. It was fully formed. It had infrastructure as code. It was a fully working thing. All it had to do is we scaled up. We delivered 13 different prototypes until security finally approved one in 2.5 months for complete cloud architecture, from the internet gateway to the databases and services underneath.
And this was like some kind of a product that the backend was in-house and you wanted to move it to the cloud, to AWS or Amazon or Azure.
Well, we were not moving. We were writing everything new from scratch, interfacing with a couple different databases on the back end, but really trying to keep everything cloud-based in Azure, not AWS. Okay,
so it's a new product. Yep. That the goal was to make sure that it's all on some cloud or
yes,
like you said, Azure. Okay.
Right. And so that one dynamically reforming team every 2 days worked for 2.5 months, delivering all these different prototypes until security finally gave it the stamp of approval, and then it was done.
And was it like every 2 days, like different stories that appeared there? Like the level of granularity that you see is like, oh, I need the login, I need this, I need some database. Like very tiny.
We had 13 different discovery trees for it. And discovery trees is something that came out of that first FaST implementation at company. And so we would say, okay, this delivery number one, prototype number one, security didn't want. They couldn't tell us what they didn't like about it, unfortunately, because I mean, their security, they didn't want to tell us. They just said, nope, we don't like that one. Try again. And so we kept trying and trying different mixing and matching and layering on different things and eventually getting a little bit of feedback here and there. And after 13 different discovery trees, we finally got approval.
And discovery tree is like something that the team are doing internally, or something that product people are doing together with engineers while they're running. Just they're mapping the challenge and every challenge and solutions.
A discovery tree is just a basic hierarchical tree that is a tool for development that says the top level, here is our goal, and you just sort of task things out as needed. It's just-in-time planning. I've got posts on discovery trees and talks.
So in this example, it can be, hey, I want to be in the cloud, right, for this new product, right?
Yep.
That's the goal. And then it's kind of like Wardley mapping. Do you know Wardley maps?
I'm not sure.
Wardley mapping is a way to build strategies together based on like Art of War, Santu. But the idea is that you have all the components underneath, right? That you need to achieve a need, whatever the need is. And then you just map them, and then you just break them down into like subcomponents.
Sort of, except with the discovery tree, you're not trying to design everything that you need. It is, what is the first problem we're going to tackle? And working from there, and then discovering things as you go. If you've got a fully formed out discovery tree or this map, it doesn't leave room for discovery. And for discovery trees, you're trying to do just-in-time planning and minimize the amount of time spent planning and architecting and making wrong decisions. Because once we get into something, we don't know what we don't know. So let's just dive in and start it.
And does every team describe or display the discovery tree as part of the 2 weeks, 2 days, every 2 days meeting, this
Yep.
FaST meeting?
Yes, I will post a link to my discovery tree talk as well too.
So is it like every team has its own discovery tree, or it depends? It can be maybe discovery tree, it can be for multiple teams, or
it's generally clear. A discovery tree per ensemble.
What's an ensemble?
The mob.
I don't know what it means.
Like the swim lane. Paige had 4 swim lanes that he showed on his diagram. There would be 4 discovery trees, and we had them on rolling whiteboards, and we just rolled them around. That was when we were in person. Since then, COVID, I've evolved discovery trees, and I really like Miro and Mural for them. They're awesome.
Cool. Wow. Thank you.
And I just put a post about discovery trees in there.
Is there a place where people can see, hey, here are the companies that are using this approach fast? You have like a kind of like a more for like sales for you guys. I don't know if you care about sales, because you're a consultant, right? You're doing consulting for fast. Is that what you do?
We have in the past. We're open to that possibility. I've implemented it at Starbucks. I've implemented it at, well, we implemented it at Primera. We've implemented it at auto manufacturer, internet security gateway manufacturer, a couple other places.
Financial institutions. I know that that there is a that James Shore, who wrote The Art of Agile Development.
Yep.
He's
Open
done
Sesame.
it. Companies. One that he's actually at right now. I believe they have 2 teams, and we'll be expanding those, or 2 collectives, and they'll be expanding those.
And are there contexts where you say this is not a great approach? Like what kind of, there's no one size fits all in complex systems, right? So where would you say, no, this is not a great time or place environment to try fast?
Yeah, I think when there's a strong command and control structure, I think really it's you know,
Trust and psychological safety have to be there.
yeah, yeah.
A strong learning culture has to already be in place or open to. Organizations that are open to change. Because it is radical change.
And how
At some level, if you
yeah,
keep
and
taking
what is it? What does it manager like? I'm a manager. I have 5 engineers, right? Under my what am I doing? What is my job now? How can I even be a manager? Do you have managers?
What was your job before?
I'm an engineering manager. That's what I do right now.
Well,
So, but
I know, but do you manage their careers? Do you manage what
Yes.
they do?
I make sure to try to help them with their career, try to align their aspiration to the what the org needs, and if there's misalignment, try to find them a better place.
Right. So hop into the ensemble with them, write code with them.
I think
Okay,
that
so join them as an engineer in IC basically, if possible.
Well, no, but you're still there as a manager. I mean, I've had that role in a couple different companies.
So the same people, and they might work on different stuff, different pieces of the code base. Doesn't matter basically. I'm still helping them with their career, even though they're constantly changing. There's not really a team. I have an individual that might be different places. They're not a team anymore.
Well, I think organizations are going to demand that there's still a reporting team, but that doesn't mean that the work team has to be evaluated that way. You could think of yourselves as contracting teams.
So they're not working together anymore, probably, right? They're going to be all over the place. Every few weeks, they're going to move to different products.
But you said you're managing the developers, not managing, you can manage the individual developers and their growth and their livelihood and their morale in the company.
We just don't have the boundary and this idea of the identity of right now we're owning a product, right? We're owning the backend and the front end for whatever, customer success organization. That's my role, right?
Yeah.
But in this world, I'm still gonna have the engineers, but they won't have this identity that we own this specific product.
I don't think that's correct. So I think, and so part of the issue is that if we're creating these silos, we get into this sort of like the ownership of the product was still there. We had 3 different products at Primera Blue Cross, and we had 50 some people on it, and we all owned that product. It's really much more about getting rid of the dependencies on other teams. And especially when you have that dependency on another team, why not put those 2 teams together and allow them to own both the aspects, both the products that they're working on, and build it as one? And so going back as a manager, you are still the manager, but your role changes in that you're not necessarily there to tell them or to guide them into certain aspects of the work, but you're there to support them through growing their career, through making sure that all the paperwork gets done, and bonuses, and and all that sort of thing. But it changes. It changes that you're not above them. You're more to the side of them. I don't know if that's a really easy way to, it seems a little simplistic to say it that way, but
it's just different.
Yeah, because right now, let's say I'm focusing them, hey, folks, let's focus on this business objective. I want you to focus on reduce the time to onboarding health plans if I'm in the healthcare industry, right? I want to, onboard our customers. I want to reduce it and then get more revenue quicker. That's our business objective. And they're going to figure out what needs to be done. They're going to work with product directly, right? Figure out what does it mean to reduce time to onboarding. But they're not going to work on specific product anymore. They don't own this product. They might go and spread on whatever products they need to spread for a given week or 2 and move on to other products.
Maybe. And so part of the issue with the dynamic reteaming, so one, like when I've been in these collectives, we do have ownership of certain things. It's not like we're working in all areas of the business. The collective is made up of groups that have knowledge around certain areas. And again, I'll use the example of you have 3 teams, you know, front and middle and back team, or whatever, however you want to put it. And they all work, they all have their own products. One is the API, and one is the front end, and, you know, one is the customer satisfaction team. All 3 of them are dependent on each other in some way. And they all have their own little ownership. And if we put all 3 of them together, now they're still owners of the front and the API and the customer satisfaction. They're just all owners of it. And all the work they do, that when we worked in these collectives, there was still dependencies on external teams. There was many fewer dependencies on external teams, but it didn't mean that we just went and did, you know, DevOps work on our own, or, you know, we went and like started taking over this other thing, you know, that another team had. What it meant was that we were much less dependent, because we tried to get rid of those dependencies and put those teams with dependencies together. I
invited them to the table.
Yeah, I don't want to keep going over and over that, but we all had ownership over the work. And, you know, in fact, actually, that was a really nice side effect of this too, is that the team ownership and team responsibility for the work grows and becomes greater as we're given that autonomy to do the right thing to get the work done. And you know, as opposed to waiting for the work to come down the pipeline, what ends up happening is that the team as a whole starts to be responsible and say, oh, we see that we're going to have to do this in the future and that in the future. Let's go talk about to the business about which one of these is more important. And we have an understanding of, this is going to be hard. This might be easier, but it's got, you know, so which one of these has a better ROI for the business, and which should we focus on, right? We have our knowledge of building software. They have their knowledge of what, where the product is going. And you start to kind of, again, that ownership, that team ownership starts to grow. That team responsibility grows. That ability to communicate and make decisions, the right decisions, starts to mature, as opposed to waiting for waiting for someone else to make the decision. And that doesn't mean that we weren't incorrect in our assumptions at times. That's why we had communication with the business. We were like, no, this really has to be read, and it's really important. And they'd be like, no, it doesn't have to be read right now. We can come back and do that later.
Jeff has a question.
Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, so I mean, I love all of this. This sounds great, but I've been in organizations that tend to be like more top down. They're not open to experimentation. Like, what is a roadmap to just start, you know, delivering value by changing ways in small ways that doesn't threaten anybody and doesn't threaten the organization? And is there kind of like a roadmap to FaST that you guys can suggest?
Experimentation. Roadmap to FaST. I don't know that there's one that doesn't start to, you know, cause anxiety in managers who want the status quo to remain the same.
Status who?
Yeah. You know, little tiny experiments. What if instead of 2 weeks, we tried doing a 1 week iteration length? Could we try that? You know, for the next month, or for the next 2 months, we're going to try having a shorter iteration length, because we think it will be more effective to getting feedback and implementing that feedback. And we're going to start on this day, we're going to end on this day, and then we'll talk about whether or not that worked and come up with maybe another experiment. at the end of it, so experimentation is a fabulous way to kind of start implementing these things, because if you pose it right with a start and expected outcome, and we'll talk about that and maybe come up with another experiment at the end. If you pose it in that way, management hears, oh, it's just an experiment. Oh, it's just there's an end date. We could, you always pose it like we could actually go back if we find the experiment doesn't work with doesn't have the outcome we expected.
So Toby, this is the experiment is a new term for anarchy.
Yeah.
No, so it's the easy, it is, Jeff, the easy way to dip the toe into change and to start looking at trying to change things. And so, Jeff, what I say is find a way, find things that the company you're with, find things that they're doing that go towards the FaST way, and start proposing experiments to try and leverage that more. And this falls back on, in part, Woody Zuhl's Turn Up the Good. So yes, we find that having firesides or getting all the right people together to tackle a Sev1 defect is good. Well, maybe we should try and do that on some other work and slowly introduce an ensemble in. Same thing with Dynamic-Reteaming. Hey, we needed to get everyone to the table to do this and to tackle that one hard problem. Well, we got this new hard project. Maybe we can get all these people together for that. Now,
but be careful not to telegraph an agenda.
Yes.
Make the experiment just an experiment.
And my thing with experiments is, and this was one of my friends who's one of the engineers on the iPhone, the EEs on the iPhone, he talks about it. He says, if you're not writing it down, all you're doing is messing around. So literally, when I do an experiment with a team, or the team, I write up at the top, experiment, here's the protocol, here's the hypothesis, here's the duration, and I try to make them short durations, and when we come back and revisit it. And then the results. And I keep track of all those. It makes a big difference if you write it down, because then you can, number one, I have a reminder to check back in on it. Other folks have a reminder to keep doing it, and things like that.
I like the power of language, turning up the good. That sounds good. And then, and it sounds like you guys have kind of different retrospectives. There's turning up the good, and then there was what was the other one that I saw?
The guild meeting.
The guild meeting, yeah.
That was interesting because, and I won't go into my thoughts on retrospectives or Quentin's thoughts or Paige's personal thoughts on them. However, what we've found that retrospectives are normally not very effective. And I know Diana Larson, and she's helped me try and come up with effective retrospectives. Most retrospectives use the 3-column format, and it's just a gripe session and nothing ever changes. So Turn Up the Good offered us an opportunity to find a way to enhance and work on the good things. What we found is there were a small group of people that really wanted to bring up the bad things. So the guild meeting was in part a gripe session, 30-minute gripe session. And at the end of it, when asked, okay, what do you want to do about this? Oh, I don't want to do anything. I just wanted to talk about it. Like, oh, okay. So we gave the opportunity for people to gripe about it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, solutions focus instead of problem focus.
Interestingly, with the retrospective, especially, so we did have Woody come in a few times to do some teaching, which is a whole nother discussion about learning as a team and growing as a team and that sort of thing. But we had Woody come in a few times, and the turn up the good came out of that. And also the idea of doing short, like little retrospectives all the time, not waiting. Let's not wait weeks to talk about something. Let's have a little retrospective, like, how'd that go today? What did we like doing, and what do we want to do more of tomorrow? Or, what do we want to do more of after lunch? You have it before lunch and then at the end of the day or whatnot. And when you start to do that more and more, what happens is that the retrospective almost goes away, because people are like, God, the discussion starts to be like, boy, we should go talk to somebody in security about this. It'd be nice if the retrospective issue is, it'd be nice if we had somebody in security that we could talk to about this and get their feedback. And what happens is, the more you do it over and over, and the shorter the time frame between those iterations actually becomes, someone goes, oh, we should talk to someone in security. Let's go do that. Right? It doesn't have to be formalized. It just sort of starts to happen. The shorter the time length between the,
I can remember those discussions with the security. It's like, we need to talk to someone in security. Oh, well, there are those two guys, the two contractors. Just send them an email. Well, why don't we go talk to them?
Yeah.
What building are they in? We think they're in building 1. Okay, let's go over to building 1. And we walked around building 1 until we found them.
Yeah.
And we talked to them.
Or I wish we had a tool that would just copy all these log files into whatever. Like, instead of talking about it, we ended up, the more you do it, the more you make them short and small, the more you get that bias towards action of for the outcomes. And then it becomes like, oh, we should have that. Oh, let's go do it. You and I will break off from this ensemble, and we'll just go write something like that and see if we can't figure it out. It really, it's sort of these weird, how do I say it? The repercussions of doing things over and over changes the way, like, when we say, well, we didn't really have retros, we did in the beginning, but eventually, the more we had them, the sooner we had them, the more often we had them, the less we needed them, because we just started to talk about it and communicate whenever something came up that needed to be talked about.
It circles back, Paige, to your original premise that software development, software engineering is a complex endeavor of human centered issues that, I keep thinking the organizational change models are very relevant. Jeff, you were talking about how do you get started. You get started based on where the organization and where your team members, where your subjects are in the learning curve. And, the suggestion of experimentation is great because it builds a competency for change and a tolerance for change and a bias towards action, and really building. We don't do things because changing the reason why we do things. The reason why we do things is because we're searching for effectiveness, as opposed to we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Hey, Paige, you're not suggesting that people just start, like, okay, everyone, if you've got a complaint about anything, just say it right now. If there's anything you think needs doing, just say it right now, and we'll get. I mean, these things. I mean, in terms of psychological safety, there's a culture and a practice that needs to be built up before. Yes. Like, I mean, in couples counseling, they tend to say, just start every week, have a little gathering.
Yes, and I don't. I like, great practices require a lot of work, right? And I don't mean just learning to collaborate, learning to write TDD, all those sort of things. That requires work and practice regularly also. But becoming a high-performing team, doing great work in these fabulous ways at companies requires a lot of work from the team, from the people, and a lot of growth and a lot of, you know, change in how we work. It requires becoming a team, which is really not what most of us are working in, right? We're working in a group of people that happen to be on the same function or skill, you know, set area, but we're not really a team. And it's not easy. And that the change that comes from learning to be a team is also what drives the change in the company and the processes. And so, no, I wouldn't say, I'm not saying that people should just immediately go to, you know, this sucks and I this is dumb and we should change this. I think that happens in the beginning, but the more we practice, the more we become a team, the more we learn to communicate effectively, which, holy crap, it's all really about communication when we get back to it. You know, when we're talking about being a team and doing these great processes, like we have to learn to that when I say this, I didn't like this and this is really hard for me, I'm not, even if I use your name, I'm not saying you suck. What I'm saying is you happen to be there and this is hard for me and I'd like to find a way to change it, right? And that ability to see that we're all in this together and we're all here to make great software and we're all here to make money eventually, right, for ourselves, but also to make a great product, to be part of something, and that feedback is not done with this intent of putting other people down, but continuing to grow myself and my team. And I know that's a lot that I just said, but really, that's when you get to that point, that's when the magic happens. Thank you, Julie. I knew you'd like that one.
Okay.
I'm
multitasking
like crazy and I don't want to be disruptive, but I've been here with you as much as I could be. So like to all of that, Paige.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the popcorn might have stopped popping. Are we good wrapping it up?
My question is, what's next? Like, how do we simulate this stuff? Who wants to join on maybe Alice, few engineers want to build something together? Like open source, Toby, do some chaos engineering, mob programming. Let's do it. Let's build a program together. Maybe
I'm definitely thirsting for some experience.
maybe we can build software for FaST. That's really the product. Let's commoditize FaST. Let's make it democratize it, right?
We'll call ourselves a collective.
It shouldn't be a Steven and Paige who can hold all this magic in their big brains. It needs to be everybody.
Yes.
6 years old with an idea and a few friends should go and use FaST if they want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead, Toby.
Say the mob programming group actually. So I was at Agile Open Northwest. Talked to Woody and Jeremy Lightsmith, who was then at Nordstrom, and Llewellyn Falco as well. We all got together and helped figure out, like, let's try helping you set up a meetup group. So I imagine that being at Agile Open Northwest together, because I'm going to go. I don't know if you're going, Oren, but
It's going fast.
Right. I got to get my tickets.
So I did put a link to our Seattle Code Crafters Slack channel in the chat here. You guys are more than welcome to join us and continue great conversations there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you communicate over this code craft? Do you have like a channel, like a Slack or something?
Yeah.
Oh,
Paige just posted it.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. And Paige and I will be at Agile Open Northwest this year. I may or may not be at Agile Open Canada, which is held in Victoria. As well. If you can, Agile Open Northwest is awesome. It'll be in Portland. It's 3 days for what, $300?
$345.
$345, and that includes
breakfast and lunch every day too.
Yeah, I mean it's a cheap conference, and awesome. And Llewellyn will be there this year. I'll be there. Matt Plavican will be there.
I'll be there for what it's worth.
Julie will be.
Yay.
Then you have to come and see Julie. There's a pool on
One
what color her hair will
registration.
be.
Woohoo! What's the learning outcomes? I'm half kidding. I'm half kidding. Don't answer.
No, you can get in on the pool on what color her hair will be.
No, he has a serious question. Have you ever been to, remember in the very beginning of this, Paige was talking about open space and the way that we start in a circle and then we build the agenda together around a central theme, but not necessarily. That's the format for Agile Open Northwest all the time. It's like part of that meeting structure always, is that it's an open space style. And so the conversations that you'll have and the learnings that you will take away will be wholly your own. There's almost no way to predict it. But what we could predict is that you will have powerful conversations with people that you never would have gotten FaceTime with. You will learn deeply about things that you care about a lot. That's what happens in an open space. And beyond that is
I'm comfortable. Not sure if I'm comfortable with emergent outcomes.
Be prepared to be surprised.
I'm not an explorer ant like you guys. I'm more in the complicated domain, unfortunately. But
that's okay. There's something for you as well.
Yep, there will be.
I'm half kidding.
Okay.
Sounds amazing.
All right. So I'm going to stop this.